This lecture we discussed about serializer as well as views. Now in this lecture let us start our journey with practical implementation. The first thing is I'm going to close this view because we are not going to utilize it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder inside my app and I'm going to store all the required file like URLs, like views, and in future we are going to create file like permission, throttling or anything else that will be inside our API folder. So what I'm going to do is right click here, create a new folder, call it API, and I'm going to create all type of files except model. All type of files I'm going to create inside it. So for now let me create views.py and I'm also going to create urls.py. So these two will be required for now. Let me close this settings and I also need to just copy this one. Since I'm not going to utilize this URL, I'm going to paste it here. Save this one and close this one for now. Just jump onto my main URL and here I need to change information. It will be watchlist underscore app. Then I'm going to get inside my app API folder, which is api.urls. So I'm going to get inside this folder, then API folder, and inside that we have this URL folder. Okay, once I get here, I have this list and then I have these two views which I need to change. So instead of my watchlist underscore app, then I need to use api.views. So all the views will be inside this particular folder. So if I jump here, I need to add all my views content here. Let me close this one. Let me close this admin.py. Remember we need to change models a lot. It will be here. I don't need this urls.py now. I can delete this one. And also I'm not going to use this views. I can comment all of this. Later you can access this file and see all the code, but I'm not going to utilize it. So everything we are going to do right now is inside this API folder. Let me close this one and we have these two view names. Okay, let me get back here. The first thing I'm going to do is I need to start writing views. So it's simple. The first thing, let me import my models. So from I just need to import it from my watchlist underscore app. Then I need to just select my models and here I need to import. So I have a model name movie. I need to import movie. So this is going to be my first import and as usual I just need to write a simple class. So for now I'm just writing a class to access the complete list about my movies. I'm going to call it as movie list like previous, and then inside this I'm going to take request. Everything is exactly the same way that we have done till now, but content will be changed inside here. Now this is the first step. Remember I talked about serialization. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new file called as serializer.py and I'm going to create this inside my API folder. Let me call this as serializers.py. Take care of this name. Now serializer is important because we are going to map all the values step by step. So if we are going to work with different model files, we are going to map each values step by step in our serializer itself. So later on we don't have to map them here. So what I'm going to do is first I'm going to import serializer from REST framework. So all you have to do is use REST framework and you need to import serializer. Make sure to check spellings again and again because you are going to get error. Definitely you are going to get error regarding these spellings. That's it. Now let me write a serializer class. So all you have to do is use class and then here if my model name is a movie, my serializer name will be movie serializer. Cool. So this is my movie serializer. Here I have imported my serializer class and inside that we have two classes as we have discussed, either serializers and then we have model serializer. So first, let us start our journey with serializer. So all I have to do is use serializer. That's it. Now here we need to map each individual element. So we are going to have ID. Wait a second, I need to write things here, but for now just take ID. Then we are going to have a name, description as well as active. So it will be name. I need to add information about name itself. Then we have description and then we have active. Now if you have worked with form, there are chances you might have worked with each individual elements in form also. Same thing we have to do with serializer. All we have to do is just describe about this particular field. So ID is going to be an integer field. All I have to do is use integer here. And this is going to be a read only field. That means I'm not going to edit ID. If I'm fetching any data, if I'm creating it, it will be automatic and I'm not going to edit anything related to ID. So I'm going to use it read only as true. The next thing is about our name and it is going to be a character field, but this is not read only, so I need to write it. That's it. Description is also going to be a character field, and then we are going to have active. Now this active is going to be a boolean field. Make sure you remove this. Read only means we are not going to edit anything. It's just going to be accessed by us, nothing else. Now that's it. So you have created a serializer that is going to map all the values. Now we are going to do a lot of things inside this. We can add validation, we can add methods regarding create, update, and we can do a lot of things here. Step by step we will understand about it. So that was our first process about serializer. So that means once we get this data, instead of doing this, we can just use serializer, and inside our serializer everything will be mapped automatically, and then we just need to return JSON response, right? Yeah, something like this. So let me get back here. First let me get my complex data. So I'm going to use movie, and here I need to select movie object, and then I'm going to get all. So since this is a movie list, I'm going to select all the objects. Now the next thing is I'm going to utilize serializer. So I need to create a variable to store all the data. I'm going to call it as serializer. You can call it anything, but I'm going to call it as serializer. And here what I need to do is I need to utilize my movie serializer, and then I need to pass my complex data, which is movies. And I also need to import this. So what I'm going to do is from my watch list, it's going to be api.serializer. I'm going to import movie serializer. So I'm going to import from this directory, I'm going to import movie serializer. That's it. The first task is done. Now all I have to do is I just need to return this response. So I'm going to use response, and I need to just use serializer.data. Now if you try to print this serializer, it is also going to be an object. So to access all the information, we need to use .data. This looks fine. You can see we don't need to map anything. You can see we don't need to convert anything right now. Everything is done with the help of this serializer. This is the basic step. I also need to import this response. So what I'm going to do is jump on the top, and I need to select REST framework here and go into response, import response. So now I have access to this response. This looks fine. Jump onto my URLs. We have this list. I need to run my server. I did some mistake. There is no module name. I missed an S. Jump here, add a S here. I just hope you realize how I'm solving these error. So once that is done, I'm going to get an error again. Yeah, so we have created this URL again, and currently we don't have any movie details. So let me create another class, and I'm going to call it as movie underscore details. It is going to accept a request and also it is going to accept a PK. Once that is done, we are going to utilize our movie variable and we are going to store everything for a single object only. So I'm going to utilize get where my PK is equals to PK. That means I'm accessing this primary key, which is this, and I'm passing this to PK. Once that is done, I also need to create a serializer. Going to select this movie serializer. I'm going to pass this object, and then all I have to do is just return a response. This looks fine. I hope you got the idea. But there are still tons of things because we haven't created views like we discussed in the earlier lecture. We haven't used @decorator, something like this that we discussed earlier. But let's see what type of error we get or if we are going to get any error or not. So our server is running. Let me visit this particular port. If I try to access one, I'm going to get an error. Jump back here. And if you see, I have an error regarding accepted underscore renderer, not set on response. So what is this and how we are going to get this? So the thing is, if you search on Google, we haven't added any condition to view. We haven't added any decorator to view. We haven't given what type of get request we need to get, what type of post request we need to get. So we haven't informed anything. We need to fix that first. Now what I mean by that, if you jump onto this Django REST framework website, go to API guide, click on this views, and here we are going to utilize the current ways API view because we are using function based views. Now what Django REST framework do is they provide this API view decorator by which we can describe what type of request we need to accept. That means there are 4 or 5 type of common request. The first one is get, the second one is post, then we have put, then we have delete, and you will see a lot more once you start working on it. These are the 4 common ones, that is get, post, put and delete. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start working with API view. And here you don't need to mention like this. All you can do is just start using API view. By default it is set to get. So all I have to do is first import it. Let me copy this one. Remember, go to API guide, go to views, click on this function based views. You will have option about API underscore view and copy this one. Let me jump onto my VS code. At the top, I am going to import it. Now we have access to this view. All I have to do is use this @ and this API view. So if I jump back to my DRF documentation once, at this point of time we are just accepting this get request. By default this is for get request, but maybe we need to add post request, we need to add put request. All we have to do is just add a comma and then keep adding all the type of requests that we need to follow. Currently we are just accepting a get request. Now if you don't know what is get, what is post, what is put and what is delete, get means that we are just delivering the data. That means if a client sends a post request, that means they are sending some data and we need to store that data in our database. Put request means we are going to update some data. Then we have delete, that means we are going to delete some data. I will be talking about them in detail in the next lecture when we start working with different type of request. Let me save this one for now. And let me jump onto our browser again, try to access this information. Now here you see this different type of view and this is our response. So we selected the first item and this is our response. Let me try to access list here. And again, I'm going to get an error. Now the error is pretty basic. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a homework. If you're watching this lecture till now and if you have implemented everything till now, what you need to do is you need to search about this, why this error is coming. Pause this lecture right now and search about this error right now and see why it is coming. It will give you a good read about serialization for sure. So the thing is, when we have multiple objects, we need to define many equals to true. What I mean by this, that means our serializer need to visit multiple objects in our query set. Here if you see, I selected only single query set. That's why we don't need to add many equals to true. But when I have multiple objects, if you remember I have 2 or 3 or 5 films, our serializer need to visit each element and then map it. So here we need to define many equals to true. Once that is done, if I jump here, refresh this one, you can see I'm able to access all the content regarding my movie list. Now here you might see this type of interface instead of this. So usually any type of API response look like this JSON, but we are getting a response like this. Why? Because of Django REST framework. So Django REST framework has this browsable API, and what I mean by browsable API, you can see you have a proper response, you have more information about what is our status code, which is 200 OK. We'll be talking about this later again. What type of methods are allowed, only get method is allowed, and if I need a JSON response I can select that. So this is pretty important. Now once we have post request, put request, you will also see a form here to send a post request or put request. So this is something important with Django REST framework, which is this browsable API. Now if I try to access a different element, which is 1, I'm able to access this. Let's try 2. I'm able to access this. So that's how we are going to work. This is pretty basic. Now the main motive of this lecture was to make you understand about serialization as well as this API view. That's it. I hope you got the idea. Let me do a quick revision. So earlier we had this type of view where we used this complex data, converted this and then sent a response. But now what we did is we created a serializer which handles everything regarding this conversion, and all we have to do is select the complex data, pass this data to our serializer. If we are going to have multiple objects, then we need to pass this many equals to true. Then just use serializer and dot data and send a response. Now this view need information if we are going to get a get request, post request, put request or delete request. So for that we are going to utilize API underscore view, which is a decorator, and we can utilize this through our API guide. Now in the next lecture what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk more about this serializer as well as this view and try to expand our project. Till this point of time we did pretty basic. We just understood how to start things. Now in the next lecture let us try to add more requests here. That means get, post, delete, put, and try to expand our serializer, try to talk more about this. I hope this lecture was helpful. Now you have basic idea about what we are doing. From the next lecture, let us continue our journey with views as well as serializer. Thank you for following, and I see you guys in the next one. Hey there, welcome back. Now let us continue our project. So till now we have only performed get request. That means by default this API view carries only get request. But we also need to perform post request as well as delete as well as other requests like put and patch. Now the first thing I recommend you to do is just jump here, click on tutorial, click on serialization. So this will help you to understand how to start your project that we already did. This will also give you a brief idea that how to create a model that we already did, but here it will talk about how to write serializer class. So we create a serializer.py and then we write this particular class. Now here you will see these two methods inside our serializer. So we have a create as well as update. Till now if you jump in our serializer we haven't created that. Now why we need that? Currently we are only performing a get request. That means fetch data from database and just return this, return a response. That's it. But when we are going to work with put request or post request, we need to utilize these method. So I'm going to work on it. And the second thing is about our views. So if you remember this view, we need to add these requests. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this one, which is my get as well as post. We'll be talking about put and patch later, but just talk about this, which is our get and post. So currently we have these two requests. Let me get inside it, and here if I have a get request, I need to do certain thing. If I have a post request, I need to do certain thing. But let me also work on this serializer. So what I'm going to do is inside this I'm going to create a method which is known as create, and this is going to take self, and it is also going to take validated data. I will be talking about each one of them, don't worry. So here I'm going to take validated data. Now once we get this validated data, all I have to do is create an instance in my object, that is in my database, and just return that instance. So here I am going to create that particular instance. I am going to use movie.objects, and instead of all I am going to use create, and I need to pass this validated data. Now this data is going to have everything, our name, description as well as active. Now I need to return this, so I can directly use return statement. Something similar I need to follow with my update. But first let me get to my view. Currently I only have get as well as post. For post I need this create. Let me jump here. Inside this I need to divide this into two parts. The first one is here I'm going to check if my request method is equals to get, then I'm going to do this. So here if I receive a get request, then I'm going to perform this. Else if I receive a post request, so if my request is post, then what I need to do is I need to do serialization, I need to validate data, and I need to create this. I need to use this. So here I am going to first serialize the data. Remember, if I am going to receive a post request, I don't need to do this. I don't need to return anything at this point of time. So if I receive a post request, that means I'm going to get data from user. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a serializer. I'm going to use movie serializer here, and I need to save the data. So what I'm going to get is I'm going to get data from user. I'm going to utilize this request, and this is going to have data. Remember, if I'm going to get request, I'm going to return my response. That means user need information. If I'm going to receive post request, that means user is sending some information and I need to store in my database. So I got this information about user, and here I pass this into serializer. That means I have created this object using our serializer. Once that is done, I need to check if it's valid. If the serializer is valid, all I have to do is I need to save, and that's it. I can return a response, and I can return this serializer data. That's it. Here you can also add different type of conditions like try, accept, and we can also send error. So if it's not valid, let me add a else condition. If this condition is not true, that means if the content is not valid, what I'm going to do is I'm going to return a response, which is serializer dot error. Yeah, errors. That's it. So if things are going well, we are going to send our data. If not, we are going to send a error. That's the base thing, and we just created a only create method. If you need more information, I strongly recommend to visit this documentation. You will get more information. That here we just create and return a new snippet. This is the model name that they are using. So here we create and return a new movie instance given the validated data. Now one important thing that you need to understand is, if I jump back here, this data that we are getting here is because of this return. I hope you got the idea. Now that's done. So let me save this one, and what I'm going to do is jump onto my browser. First let me check my server is running. And here let me visit list. Now remember we have two options, which is get as well as post. Why? Because we have created this get and post. Jump back here. So we have this data. Now you see we have this particular contact information. So if I just decrease the size, you can see this is our data because of get request, and this is our information. For a moment, if I just remove this post request here, save this one, jump back here, refresh, you can see this form is gone. So because of this decorator, we have option what type of request we can send to any type of URL, endpoint, or any type of view. We have both get as well as post. So let us start using this browsable API and send some data to our database. Let me copy this. Remember we are talking in the form of JSON, so I also need to send data in the form of JSON. So we need to send these three fields, and if I jump here, our ID is going to be auto created. I just need to pass name, description as well as active. So maybe I need to add a new movie. Let me call this movie as Programmer X, and there will be some description, call it as 3, and this is going to be true. And if I send a post request, I got an error because we haven't included something in our serializer, if you remember. Let me jump back here. Jump here. We use this movie object, but we haven't imported it. So what I'm going to do is copy this line and jump here. Save this one. This should work fine. Let me refresh this one for once. Copy this one again. And here remove this ID. Create a name which is Programmer X. This is a new movie. Some description. Send a post request, and we have created. Now remember what type of response is this? This is the response that we have sent here. I hope you got the idea. If I try to access this list again, you can now see we have 3 elements. That is 3 objects. If you want to get more information, just visit your admin panel, refresh this one, and this is the item that we added. I hope you got the idea how we are doing this. Now there are a lot more things that we need to do, which is update. So if I jump back here, now currently we only have these 2 options for a movie list. But what about if we select our individual item? So in a movie list, we cannot add anything else. If you realize, if I need to update anything, I need to visit that particular item. If I need to delete anything, I need to visit that particular item. Suppose I need to delete this ID 1. So I need to visit that ID. So if I visit this one, currently we only have get request. That means this part. So here, if I need to update this one, I need to add a put request. If I need to delete this one, I need to add a delete request. If I need to partially update it, I need to add a patch request. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this request, paste it here. I cannot perform a post request. Why? Because we are already accessing an individual element. Remember this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add put and I'm going to add delete. Now again I need to define all 3, which is my request. If my request method is get, I need to perform these several tasks. Once that is done, if my request method is put, I need to perform several tasks. And if my request method is delete, I need to perform several tasks. I hope you got the idea what we are trying to do. Let me save this one for now, and inside this put request, that means I'm going to update. Now remember there are 2 things, put and patch. Put means if I get data, some data, I'm going to update every single field. And patch means suppose I get data for only one field, I'm going to just update that one field. Rest everything will remain same. Input, we rewrite everything. So if I receive all the three fields, I'm going to rewrite everything. Okay, let's get inside this put. What we are going to do is, the first thing is definitely we need to use our serializer, and that means if you remember our this post request, we created a serializer and we received data from user. Same we need to do that. Put means someone is going to update, so someone is going to send updated data, someone is sending us data. Once we get the data, we need to check if this is valid or not. So we are going to call this serializer is valid. So if this is valid, we are going to save it. Otherwise, we are going to get an error. So this is the first condition, and otherwise else we are going to get an error. So if this is valid, we are going to save it and we are going to return it. That's it. But if this is not valid, we are going to get an error just like the previous one, and we are going to return it here. I hope you got the idea what we are trying to do. So if we have a pull request, we get the data that is sent by user, we serialize it, we then check for if this is valid, save it, return that response, we return that data, else we are going to send an error. Now we need to write this update condition. Now when we are going to update, we are going to get this instance. Now this instance carries the old values and this validated data carries the new value. So that means if I have name and if I'm updating, this instance is going to carry the old update and this is the new one. So what we need to do is we need to just map everything old with new. So if I have instance name, this is my old name and I need to just update it with the new one. So this is my old name and I need to update it with my new name, which is my validated data. I need to get this new name. I hope you got the idea what we are trying to do. If not, I strongly recommend to visit here. What we are trying to do is we are going to update and return existing movie instance given the validated data, and we are going to perform everything exactly like this. And remember, you also need to pass your old instance. So I need to pass my old instance, which is instance.name. That's done. I need to do same thing for my description. So if you see, because of this tab 9, it's pretty easy. It's auto completing everything. What we did is, this is our old instance and we try to extract information about our new instance with our validated data and we have updated it. Now we need to do something similar for our active. So all I have to do is use active and that's it. Here I need to pass that instance. That's done. Now we have updated each individual element, that means each individual object value, and here I need to save this instance. Once that is done, I need to return. So all I have to do is just send a return, and what I can do is I can just send this instance because it is going to contain all these values. That's it. I hope you got the idea what we did right now. Just created a condition for update. Okay, let me jump here, try to access my value for individual item, refresh. I did some mistake. Let me see. There is some indentation error. Check views.py line number 40. Jump here. Views line number 40. Okay, we haven't added delete condition, but for now let me comment this one. Jump back here, refresh. Control plus C if it's not working. Yep, it worked. So now what we have is we access the first element. Now we have options for put. That means we need to update everything. Now here let us try to put something. So let us try to update this one. And you will be surprised or maybe you are not going to get this updated. So if I try to use update here, try to send a put request right now. Here you will see we just created a new object, and why this happens. One thing we missed, When we are working with this serializer, we also need to pass which object we are trying to update. That means I need to select the exact object that we are going to update, which is going to be our particular ID, PK ID. So if I'm updating ID 1, I need to pass it here with my serializer. Once that is done, it is going to work well. So if I jump back here, if I refresh this page, now this is our object 1. Copy this one, paste it here. I don't need this ID. I can remove this here. And if I try to update this one, this is updated. Try to send a put request. Now you can see this is updated. If I refresh this one, even if I jump here, try to open my first one, you can see this is updated. So I hope you got the idea. I'm doing several mistakes so you understand each and everything. This is a complicated topic and there are chances that you are going to miss something here and there. So I hope you got the idea. What we did is we created a serializer, then we check if this is valid, and as soon as we call this .save method, we are going to jump onto this methods. Now remember, if this request is put, we are going to get into this update one. If the request is post, we are going to get into this create one. One good thing you can do right now is just jump here onto creating a serializer class, which is tutorial serializer. Scroll down a bit and then you will get more idea about these things. I also recommend to read this one. This will give you a better idea. That's it, that's done. I hope you got the idea what we have done till now. We just created a serializer class, we updated things, we also understood about get, post, put. Now the thing is about delete, and this should be easy. So what I'm going to do is, if my request method is delete, all I have to do is I just need to select the particular object and delete it. So here I'm going to select my movie, and here I just need to select the right movie, which is my PK, my primary key. Once my movie is selected, I can directly delete it. Now this is a query set method and nothing to do with serializer, but we have done everything here itself. That's it. Let me save this one, jump here, and I created few IDs. So let's test this one. So if I jump here and try to access ID number 6 maybe. So this is ID number 6, and if I try to delete it, all I have to do is click on delete. I sure? Yes. I got an error because we need to send some response, and that means the item is deleted but our response is not sent. We jumped here, we fetched the data, we deleted that item, but then we need to return some response. That is, of course, we need to return some response, otherwise it is impossible for JSON or our client to know what happened. So either we can create a dictionary and send a message that this data is deleted, or we can do some status code or something else. So for now I am leaving this here and we are going to continue this in the next lecture because I need to talk about status code. So we can use our status code power here and send information that this content is deleted or we got an error, anything like this. So that's it for this lecture. From the next lecture I'm going to